Hi. In answer to your question, let me start out with the question of how I came to practice Buddhism. I started learning meditation after I graduated from college. I went to a monastery while I was having my vacation from work and grad school. I happened to decide to go to this particular monastery and felt like I had come home. With this particular path of becoming a Buddhist nun is my choice. I could, tracing back to my life, see some things that may have been seeds. My parents themselves were not really believers of anything, although when we grew up here, my family actually were baptized Lutherans. That's mostly for social reasons, because my parents were good friends with our pastor. But they themselves were of the generation that they rebelled against some of the superstition that were in Taiwan during that time and prior. So some of the things I had seen that were maybe familiar paraphernalia of Buddhism were from my grandparents' generation. So my grandfather was a practicing Buddhist and was a lifelong vegetarian. And the reason that came to be was because he had gotten his wish of seeing my grandmother heal from a dying near-death experience. So he had promised to himself at that time that if my grandmother became well, that he would then become a vegetarian. And my grandmother, on the other side, often took me especially to some of the popular Taoist Buddhist-like temples in Taiwan. And she was mostly interested in just offering food and goods, placing them on these altar tables, and there were lots of incense smoke everywhere. So that was an environment that I was a bit familiar with when I was a child, but I didn't understand it. When I was a church-going girl who read passages from the Bible, it was a family situation for me, and once I got into college, I began to search for something that I felt I could more closely relate to and resonate with. And so I had studied and gone to various Bible studies. I became a vegetarian in college after I read The Jungle, and then started practicing Buddhism with meditation and chanting and some of the studying a few years after college. At this point, having been a nun for about 10 years, additional 2 years before that in training as a layperson, during this dozen years, I've been trained to incorporate a number of different disciplines into my life. The three key tenets of Buddhism are precepts, meditation, and wisdom. So the precepts aspect of it would include the way that I behave and conduct myself. So with everything that I do, say, or think, I have certain guidelines that I can refer to that would help me to make sure that I could be headed down a direction where I would feel good about myself. And so there are 5 key ones. One is no killing, so that involves obviously not murdering, but in addition, really not hurting others physically, psychologically, and socially. I am a vegetarian. I have been a vegetarian for quite a long time, and I think that also has to do with it because it's a form of being compassionate to see that other creatures, big and small, have lives just like we do. And just as we wouldn't want to be hurt, we imagine and really can empathize, stand in the shoes of other creatures and other beings that they would not want to be injured or slaughtered, be taken as meals. And the second is no stealing. So not stealing means not taking others' things without permission. It can become very refined to the level where you're not stealing glances or you're not eavesdropping. You don't avoid what you need to pay with taxes, for example. So those are certain guidelines where we could gradually hone from some of the more basic and general type of practices to some things that are very refined, all the way down to our thoughts, not even have thoughts of theft. And the third is no unwise sexual conduct. So that obviously means to be faithful to your partner. And for me, as a Buddhist nun, that means celibacy. And then the fourth is honesty, to be honest. And again, this could range from outright blatant lies to watching in general our speech. Any speech that might mislead or cause schisms or harm. And sometimes it's not even speech. Sometimes it's our body language. Sometimes it's just a little wink that could insinuate or cause problems. Then the fifth one is no intoxicants. And no intoxicants involves being clear-headed and sober, not taking any recreational drugs and alcohol so that we then are inebriated and cannot think and act clearly. So my everyday life is guided by these 5 basic precepts. Then there's also the meditation part of it, the contemplative practice, and finally the wisdom aspect of it, which has to do with insights. In my practice of daily life, in every interaction, every move, and also in scriptural studies of the Buddhist canon. So those are the 3 key tenets that are the beacons of my lifestyle. As far as how I feel that I'm connected to the rest of humanity and how important it is, there are 2 key components. One is compassion and the other is wisdom, and yet they actually feed on each other. It's similar to seeing humanity as our body, really. When your right hand is bleeding, your left hand would not think possibly of trying to cut it off as a way to help it, but instead the left hand really sees the right just as all same part of our body, and we try to take care of it. And so this is a way that we consider humanity, that we're all part of this same body and we are intimately connected. We're connected at many different levels, and quantum physics now has proven that we are all connected by the fact that we all are compositions of atoms which are made up of quarks. Quarks really are just energies that move back and forth. There's then just really no boundary between what we consider to be individual isolated identities. These lines really are blurred. And this is also a matter of which part of our brain hemisphere that we work off of. So out of that kind of wisdom, then we see the deep connections between people and all beings. So you are me and I am you, or that there really is no difference between you and I. We are all part of each other. The purpose for mankind in the world is simply be good. The law of cause and effect that applies to humankind. The reason that we're here in this particular world is because we have certain karma that led us here. So the purpose of humankind as a collective would actually be to create wholesome karma, so that way the earth will sustain itself and provide for future generations, so that there is abundance, so that there is honor for one another, and so that dignity of humankind continues to sprout and spread. As far as rituals that are absolutely necessary to being a devout follower, really following the line of law of cause and effect, ritual is not a necessity. To me, ritual is sometimes a pleasure, or sometimes an indulgence, and sometimes a contemplation. For a practicing Buddhist, or anyone who in general who may be observing the law of cause and effect and trying to do more good, it's more just about trying to be a good mother who takes care of her child, spends quality time with her child, and when possible, doing the same for a friend's child, and then maybe broadening that in the future to a child of strangers, or maybe even enemies, but broadening the circle of care so that one actually then can make that practice in of itself. And I'd imagine that's not a ritual in your question. You're talking more about ceremonial type of rituals in terms of prayers or chanting. Another aspect of the wisdom in Buddhism is to know that everything is a balance, that if we say anything is absolutely necessary, that there is a tendency for us then to become stuck to it. When that stickiness happens, like a tennis ball hitting Velcro, then that way we actually cannot break away, and that leaves us unfree. So to be free and to be liberated is to have various rituals and sometimes no rituals, depending on which stage of practice you may be, and also the combination of rituals that may include charity, meditation, prayers, study, all of that, that there is a balance and that there is not a stickiness to it. Because anything that becomes so fixated and so stuck, then it becomes skewed as a right practice. The challenges of practicing in a predominantly Christian society, I would say, is probably, first of all, no more than practicing in any society, because we are living in a world where the norm is that there is suffering every day, and it's not it's not an easy condition to be in, this condition of humankind. So it's not easy in that general sense. Specifically, in a society where Christianity is predominant, I think that I have ran across times where there may be issues in dialogue that need to be kind of laid aside, and maybe those questions cannot be fully answered, and so they simply have to be left as differences between wisdom traditions. I think there are many different types of Christianity, and depending which town in America you live, that it would vary. I love the fact that I know a lot of Christians who are very charitable and giving, and sometimes to the point of not leaving too much charity for themselves. And so I think that's something quite wonderful. And then there are also Christian scholars who go deep into Christian theology that really, I think, breaks new ground as far as where our philosophical ruminations can kind of blaze a track for every one of us. On the other hand, there are also fundamentalist Christians and others who are less accepting of others different than them, and I would imagine that makes it a difficult situation for anyone who's involved. But overall, I think that America is probably a most open culture and very welcoming of different religions, faiths, and spiritual traditions. How does a Buddhist in America maintain her faith? Buddhism is about practice as opposed to doctrine. So instead of having to make a leap of faith, it's not a requirement to have faith before practice. Or it could be said that practice strengthens faith. It's more like a laboratory where you experiment for yourself to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So someone who in America practices in a variety of different ways to maintain or strengthen their faith by keeping to the precepts that they've accepted and decided to commit to. They practice contemplative methods such as meditation, mantras, and others. The wisdom aspect of it, actually learning to garner insight from themselves, from others, from every happening and circumstance in their life and in others' lives, and also from Buddhist texts and others. Those are various ways that, as long as one continue to be permeated and soaked in this type of practice, and the practice itself would no doubt be maintained or strengthened. The Buddhist believes on good, evil, and sin. There's no basis for the idea of original sin in Buddhism. Buddhism actually considers at our origin we are inherently wise and compassionate, like a diamond that has been covered over with dust. Our job is to find that original goodness buried underneath all of that dust, and to wipe it clean to make the diamond shine. So it's not about original sin, and maybe that is why that it frees a lot of the practitioners from the guilt that comes with the culture and the history behind and related to the original sin. Good and evil, there's a general sense and general guiding principles on what is good and what is not good to do. At a certain level of practice, it's about transcendence beyond any duality. whether it's black, white, you and me, good, bad, all of that. It's about finding a middle way. This does not mean finding the fine line of down in the middle center like a cake, and you try to find the exact half line and to separate it out equally. It's not that. It's more about, it's closer to kind of the system thinking of out of the box. It's beyond the limitation of polarities, us versus the enemy, the zero-sum idea of everyone in a tiny box. But this transcendence involves us to actually go beyond the box. And like the puzzle of matches, it actually requires you moving the match outside and beyond the original puzzle itself. That's the best way I could explain it. And that's why sometimes with Buddhism it's difficult to explain with words, but I hope that when I'm pointing, you're not just looking at the finger, but you're looking at the moon or the sun that the finger is pointing to. So try to understand to the best of your ability. Sometimes the understanding actually comes when the time is right. What do I believe happens upon dying? Reincarnation, possibly to a number of different realms, including good, bad, and mixed. The note that I want to add is that the time of death is a particularly trying time, because just like when we are being born, the first thing we do is that we cry, because out of our mother's body is actually a very painful process. And again, when we leave our body, we have to endure a tremendous amount of pain. But if at that particular time, due to the practices that you have been doing, due to the good karma that you have been accumulating, then you can then direct where you want to go and leave peacefully and with ease. So that's certainly one of the major reasons too why Buddhists practice the way they do. It's almost like that our entire lifetime is a rehearsal for the moment of death. What we are getting ready for is the time of death when we are truly tested. And that test, the results of that test determines where we go next.